Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Today, I will begin to lay out my budget priorities for the next legislative session. These priorities answer the question of what is next, how we move forward in our key priority areas to keep improving the lives of our citizens here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Over the next month, I will outline plans in key areas. This announcement comes a little earlier than normal, but it is necessary because during the last budget process, the House, for the first time certainly in our history, filed an executive branch budget before the recommendation from the governor, which is supposed to start the process under state law. So today, we are starting with further action and proposing funding to build a safer Kentucky for all of our families across the Commonwealth. Public safety has remained a top priority for me, both as Attorney General and now as Governor, because safety is a cornerstone of Kentucky. And I believe every single Kentuckian should feel safe, whether it's at work, at church, in school, or tucking their kids in bed at home at night. As a dad, I understand these concerns far too well. That is why my administration has continued to take intentional steps towards creating a safer Commonwealth. And I'm proud of the progress we've made. By prioritizing public safety, my administration saw serious crime rates decrease in 2022 from the prior year, according to the 2022 crime report published by KSP. We saw a decrease in reports and arrests for homicide, drug and narcotic offenses, robbery, fraud, human trafficking, and more. We also see how our work in public safety is helping our families in other ways. This year, we announced that Kentucky was one of only 8 states in the entire country that saw a significant decrease in overdose deaths. That means from both of those reports, more Kentuckians are here with us, still alive. Fewer families have lost kids or parents. Fewer neighbors are mourning their neighbors. We could not have achieved any of this without our brave and dedicated law enforcement officers and heroes across Kentucky who put their lives on the line to protect us. Officers like Nick Wilt of LMPD, whose selfless actions charging into gunfire at the Old National Bank shooting saved a lot of lives, including some very close friends of mine. Or Floyd County Sheriff Deputy William Petrie, Prestonsburg Police Department Captain Ralph Frazier, and police officer Jacob Chaffins, who gave their lives while protecting Kentuckians in Floyd County. And Kentucky State Trooper Billy Ball, who is here with us today, along with KSP Commissioner Philip P.J. Burnett Jr. Trooper Ball is a 5-year veteran who responded to the incident in Floyd County. Along with those 3 officers we lost, plus K-9 Draco. Trooper Ball's story is one that shows the difference we can make if we properly and fully support our troopers and law enforcement officers across the Commonwealth. They are heroes, plain and simple. They are making Kentucky safer daily, and they deserve our support to continue their life-saving work. So today I'm announcing steps that will build on the progress that we have made. I'm sharing some of my budget priorities that will support law enforcement and boost public safety. With a historic budget surplus, there is no excuse not to provide the help that is needed, the best equipment to all law enforcement, because heroes like these deserve the best wages, the best benefits, the best training, and that is exactly what my budget proposal will do. First, every member of law enforcement deserves a defined pension benefit. These are people that lay their lives down on the line. They leave their homes every day to step between our families and danger. And the very least their families should know is if the worst of the worst happens, like the over 7 law enforcement officers we've lost just in a short period of time, that their family will be taken care of. So, in this budget, I am proposing to move all law enforcement back to the defined pension benefit, and we will be funding those law enforcement officers that the state would make that contribution for. Officers from across the state and from across local jurisdictions deserve a full pension with better benefits. Loss of a defined pension deeply impacted law enforcement. There was a mass exodus of troopers and officers when the defined benefit was taken away, understandably, because a pension is a promise. That's a promise I've always kept. And it has significantly hurt recruiting until recent steps that we'll talk about in a minute. This is a fight I took on as Attorney General. One of my proudest moments was standing with the FOP and educators from across the state to defeat that sewer bill where the elimination of pensions for people who had worked decades to earn them had been stuffed in a bill that was supposed to be about sewers passed in the dead of night. I took that case all the way to the Supreme Court. We won, keeping our promise, ensuring that we would continue to pay the pensions that those law enforcement officers, educators, state, county, and city workers had all earned. And I've kept up that fight. In all three of my budget proposals, I've recommended fully funding those hard-earned pensions of the Kentucky State Police. Because when we ask people to do what these officers do, we ought to be providing full support, and their families ought to know that they'll be taken care of. Our law enforcement officers provide Kentucky with safety and security daily, and they deserve the same in return. Second, for the Kentucky State Police, I'm proposing an additional $2,500 raise. This builds on the $15,000 pay bump I signed into law on April of 2022. It also builds on the 6.5% salary bump to all KRS Chapter 16 employees on July 1st that they got this year, which includes all troopers, commercial vehicle officers, and several others. Other state employees received a 6% raise that same day. KSP troopers and officers have now received nearly $18,875 in a pay bump under the steps my administration has taken over the last 2 years. And with this raise, over about a 2.5-year period, they would see a raise of over $21,000. They deserve it. We need them, and the raises are working. When our next class graduates on Friday, I'm looking forward to speaking to them at that graduation. Sworn troopers will be roughly around 940. That is the most since 2006. Our next KSP class has also received more than 700 applications, the highest number since, I believe, 2017 when we changed eligibility requirements. Raises work. Paying people closer to what they deserve works, and providing that defined pension benefit for those that put their lives on the line is the right thing to do. Now, we're also committed to ensuring our law enforcement officers are encouraged and supported to continue training. Beginning when I was Attorney General, I have fought for increases in the CLEP fund stipend. Those are stipends paid to local law enforcement all across the Commonwealth for getting significant annual training so that they have the best of the best, the newest knowledge, the best techniques to do their job. In fact, the only meeting, or one of two meetings that Governor Bevin granted me was at the beginning of both of our terms. This was the first topic we talked about, and we even provided how he could include that pay bump in his budget. As governor, I have proposed funding the CLEP fund at $4,600 in all of my budgets. That was an increase from the statutory amount of $4,100. Now, the General Assembly didn't go to that full $4,600, but I did get to sign $4,300 into law. Well, the CLEP fund is doing just fine, and we should pay out the full amount we can as long as the CLEP fund is healthy and solvent, which it is. So in this budget, I'm proposing we raise the stipend to an all-time high of $4,800. That is critical compensation to so many sheriff deputies, city police officers, and others who deserve the best that we can pay out of this fund, which isn't any tax dollars. It's dollars that should be helping these officers and their families and encouraging the best of the best training, I believe, in the country. This time, I'm also proposing that part-time local law enforcement officers are made eligible for the CLEP fund. They have to get the training. They deserve the portion of the CLEP fund for the time that they work, and this is a step that provides additional flexibility to each of our local law enforcement agencies to help meet their needs. And finally, I'm proposing a $20 million fund that will provide grants for body armor to protect our law enforcement officers. This portion of the proposal was inspired by KSP Trooper Ball, who, as I mentioned earlier, is with us today. Trooper Ball was among the brave members of law enforcement who responded to that shooter in Floyd County in 2022. He raced to the scenes and, in his words, hoped and prayed that everyone was okay. On the scene, he left cover to locate the shooter. He was blinded by the sun, at which point the shooter fired. Trooper Ball has shared that at first he wasn't even sure he'd been hit, and that was because the protective gear, the newest and best body armor that we'd been able to purchase, saved his life. Not only did the armor help Trooper Ball, it also allowed him to go back in, which he did after being hit, and help his fellow officers, even dragging one out so they could get to the hospital to be treated. Folks, this is the worst of the worst situation I think that any of these troopers or officers or sheriff deputies had ever seen. And I'm so proud of Trooper Ball's actions, how he saved lives. He truly shows the exemplary service of the Kentucky State Police. Him being here today also shows you what the best equipment can mean. And with a record budget surplus, we ought to be making that best body armor available to every single law enforcement officer across the Commonwealth. And we ought to do it as soon as we can. So if any of them face the worst of the worst, at least they have the best of the best body armor protecting them. Trooper Ball showed us that protective gear can save lives, and he is a shining example of why this funding is so important. Trooper Ball, would you like to join us and provide a few comments? Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Good morning. On June the 30th, 2022, the Commonwealth lost four of its heroes. Captain Ralph Frazier, Deputy William Petrie, Officer Jacob Chaffins, and K9 Drago. These men were Kentucky's best, and me and the Commonwealth's law enforcement mourn their loss each day, along with the 579 whose names are engraved on the Kentucky Law Enforcement Memorial. As the governor mentioned, on June the 30th, I started my day as a regular shift on patrol, and I always wear issue armor under my uniform like today that can protect me from common handgun rounds. Little did I know this will be the worst day of my career. Near the end of a busy shift, an opportunity for a late lunch presented itself as I sat with fellow troopers and sheriff's deputies and we ordered food. The deputies were summoned shortly by another deputy who was a retired state trooper, William Petrie. The former trooper needed help serving an arrest warrant, and I offered her service. But Deputy Darren Lawson said, nah, you all go ahead and eat and just bring our food. We'll yell if we need you. Only minutes passed and the call you hope you never hear came across the radio. 264 being route to Allen. Floyd SO's got shots fired. As I'm racing to the scene, two troopers behind me, I can only hope and pray everyone's okay. As we arrive on the scene, I saw fellow officers pinned down behind cruisers taking fire from an unknown position. I retrieved my rifle from the trunk, and soon after I'm reminded by Trooper Bailey Combs to put on my plate carrier, which can protect me from common rifle rounds. Next, I attempted to gain information from officers. However, all units was under an overwhelming amount of fire, and we could not locate the shooter. I decided to leave cover and move forward to locate the shooter, but little did I know I would be the next target. I was blinded by the evening sun, and the shooter fired, but missed me. The next shot struck me in the back as I turned to retreat to cover. The round hit my plate carrier, which provided such protection. I initially questioned if I'd even been shot. After realizing the shooter was somewhere straight ahead, I moved wide right and forward again. I advanced forward 30 yards and I discovered a wounded Deputy Darren Lawson, lifeless on the ground. As I stepped over Deputy Lawson and began to peek around cover, hoping to locate the shooter. A faint voice said, "Billy, you got to get me out of here." The same voice that said, "We will yell if we need you," only minutes ago. I quickly decided to get him out of the area as Deputy Dusty Newsom arrived from a neighboring house. Deputy Newsom and I attempted to drag him, but the weight was too much. I retreated again to get more help, and with the help of Trooper Bailey Combs, Trooper Michael McKinney, and Deputy Newsom, we carried him out into a cruiser where he was transported to the hospital. Next, Trooper Combs and I went back in and contained the rear of the residence to prevent the escape of the shooter. Everyone who attempted to engage the shooter that day was either shot or killed. The shooter was never seen by many until he surrendered and he was arrested. And I encourage all police officers to wear their armor and select the type most appropriate to the threat they're facing. It can save your life, but most importantly, make you a better police officer, giving you the ability to save others after being struck by gunfire. My armor saved my life that day and allowed me to help Deputy Lawson get the medical care he desperately needed. It's been 1 year, 1 month, and 9 days since the shooting, and the entire region is still devastated and mourning the loss of the 4 heroes who gave their life that day. They paid the ultimate sacrifice. They were loved and pillars of our community. And like I mentioned, body armor saved my life, and it was because of that I was able to return to my family. Governor Beshear's proposed budget includes an increase in grant funding to upgrade body armor to protect local law enforcement officers. While law enforcement officers work 24 hours a day to protect our communities, it's just as important to ensure the safety of officers while they're on the job. And this funding will make sure more officers are safe in the field. Governor Beshear, thank you for your commitment to enhancing public safety and your dedication to Kentucky law enforcement officers. Eastern Kentucky is my home, and the people are my family. I will always work to protect its communities and the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I'm so proud of this place we call home, and I'm proud of the work of our law enforcement. Together, we will continue working to make the Commonwealth a safer place. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Trooper Ball. Folks, that's what a hero looks like, and that's what a hero sounds like. Pretty special that he's with us. Over the past year and a half, we've lost 8 officers, 7 in 2022, 1 in 2023, each a child of God, irreplaceable and missed by their communities. It's my goal to do everything possible to ensure the personal safety of each officer. And Trooper Ball's story shows us how body armor can help protect these officers. There is no excuse not to fund these grants to provide life-saving armor. Right now, we have a record budget surplus, the largest rainy day fund in history, and positive economic conditions. By seeing through these proposals, I will include in my budget plan we can build on the actions this administration has already taken to improve public safety. Steps like awarding nearly $8 million in grant funding to assist state and local law enforcement agencies purchasing tools and resources. We've awarded thousands of dollars to local community law enforcement to help better support their efforts across Kentucky. We've launched a new 911 statewide cloud-based computer-aided dispatch system. This allows KSP dispatchers to better respond to calls, communicate via text message, and use specific location technology. In July, we broke ground on a new multi-purpose training facility that's named after one of those officers we lost, Jody Cash, also a former state trooper. His wife, Michelle, his parents were there to see a new $20 million plus facility at DOCJT, where we train so many of the state's new law enforcement officers, as well as provide that continuing training. Callaway County Chief Deputy Jody Cash, special man, who dedicated 22 of his 44 years on earth to service of this Commonwealth, and now a facility that has his name on it, will provide better training, more safety, better opportunity to respond in the optimal way to all law enforcement that go through it. In January 2022, I recommended $12.2 million be included in the budget for Kentucky State Police to purchase body cameras. And in January of this year, KSP demonstrated the new system, which will be distributed to approximately 780 sworn personnel. Last April, I got to sign that legislation that we had championed, the commissioner and I, for those $15,000 pay raise for state troopers. It also included paid vacation, sick leave, and holiday pay, as well as enhanced health insurance contributions for retired KSP troopers and commercial vehicle enforcement officers. Last June, I announced the military to law enforcement program that helps us hire folks that already have significant, great training and bring them into the law enforcement system. Last October, we took another step by awarding more than $350,000 in grant funding to prevent youth crime and get our youth that have fallen into it on the right track. And I've also supported legislative action, signing bills into law to make it easier for law enforcement to conduct undercover stings, increase the chances of stopping horrific crimes against children, re-employ as needed officers that have retired from the police and the fire retirement fund, expand the eligibility of potential peace officers, and better protect our children in schools by requiring a school resource officer for public, private, and parochial schools. And in July, we welcomed 33 new law enforcement officers into the Partnership of Public Safety. Since I took office in December of 2019, Kentucky has added approximately 1,193 new local police officers and sheriff deputies to our communities, and we need even more. These are real steps, real actions. It's one thing to say you back the blue, and it's another to do something about it, to provide the resources, to take the steps that improve public safety. Now I'd like to introduce KSP Commissioner Philip P.J. Burnett to say a few words.
Thank you, Governor.
Very welcome.
Good morning. Before I start, Trooper Ball, thank you. Thank you and all the other law enforcement officers who face some of the most dangerous circumstances that I have seen in my 28-year career on that tragic day in Floyd County. Tragically, we did lose Kentucky law enforcement officers that day, but no doubt all that responded were serving their communities, and numerous heroic acts were performed that day. From our agency, again, thank you, as well as everyone else who responded that day, and especially the family members of those of the officers that were lost that day. I'm happy to be here today to talk about how Kentucky State Police has been supported with much needed pay raises and other initiatives which have positively impacted our agency. Due to the efforts of Governor Beshear and General Assembly, KSP troopers and officers have received historic pay increases, which make the agency more competitive with other Kentucky agencies as well as abroad. In fact, before we had these raises, Kentucky State Police was 74th just in starting pay in Kentucky. But with those raises, that brought us up to within the top 5. It's a win-win by growing our ranks because it enhances public safety in our communities. It enables more support for KSP to be able to support our local law enforcement partners across Kentucky, as well as improves officer safety for our troopers and officers across our Commonwealth. These raises also, it helped on multiple levels. It helped because it warded off resignations and retirements. July is typically a large retirement cycle for KSP, for our swarm. Typically, we'll average in excess of 30 retirements in the month of July. What I'm happy to report is that last July, we only had 3 sworn retirements. So it's working. And give a little bit of history. In 2006, our agency, we had 1,009 troopers, the most that we've ever had in the history of our agency. But then our ranks, they began to deteriorate. And they went to about 740 in 2021. The lowest levels that we were able to go back and officially track all the way to 1988. And to give a number, in 1988, we had 949 troopers at that time. But we're growing. This Friday, as Governor mentioned, Cadet Class 103 will be graduating. And we're happy to say that with that graduation, that we will be graduating 51 troopers, and that will bring us back up to approximately 940 troopers. Very uplifting, to say the least. But we've not stopped there. What these raises, how they've impacted. We're also recruiting for our next cadet class that we have slated to start in January of next year. It will be Cadet Class 104. Already, we have exceeded in excess of 700 applications for that class. You know, we can start an academy class with up to 110 cadets. And what we can do for that first week, we can go back and we can backfill for any vacancies that we may encounter during that first week. And that's out of a 24-week regimen. But we feel confident that we'll be able to fill those slots. And with the large number of applicants that we do have, our goal for next year is that at the graduation of Cadet Class 104, finally, we hope for Kentucky State Police to be back over 1,000 troopers. But it has taken time to increase our manpower, but it's also take time for our ranks to shrink. And why did that happen? Low wages, historic low wages for our troopers. Pension reforms were the leading reason why troopers were resigning and not even put in applications on a historical basis. But with the historical pay raise that we have for increased wages, our agency will continue to grow. And in fact, what we have checked, talking with other state agencies and other large departments, we're growing at a faster rate than most other state, county, and city agencies in Kentucky and also across the country. But you've heard me describe how our agency is thriving, but we must ensure we continue to monitor the competitive pay scales that are popping up from abroad and within Kentucky, as well as the private sector, because the economy in Kentucky is booming. You know, we have to compete with that as well. But with Governor Beshear's proposed $2,500 pay raise on top of what we've already have for our sworn, a $500 increase to CLEF fund, and a proposed transition back to a favored defined KSP pension that we previously had. We feel that all that will do will bolster our retention, keep our experienced troopers, and also increase our high quality applicants well into the future. You know, we just can't be satisfied with where we're at. Yeah, we're really good right now, but we have to be looking how our agency operates. We have to be looking out into the future. And by doing these things, we're looking out into the future to make sure that we always remain competitive. And that's what this does. But in closing, support of our agency has received throughout Kentucky to ensure we have had what is needed to provide high quality public safety to Kentuckians has been tremendous. And also as important is that these competitive wages have now given our sworn the ability to drop secondary employment. We've had some troopers that were doing secondary jobs just to be able to provide for their families. Numerous troopers and officers across this state and their family members have told me repeatedly that these pay increases were life-changing for their families. Now they could take a family vacation. Now they wouldn't have to take out a loan for their children to be able to go to school. Life-changing for our agency. You know, law enforcement is stressful. And I think everybody in here agrees with that. And if you put financial stress on that as well, that exasperates that. But with those raises that we've had, that's lessened that stress. And I'm well satisfied that with that it's also improved the health and wellness of our troopers and officers across our agency. And, but thank you, Governor, for going through it and looking forward for what we'll be needing in the future. I'd like to thank all those others who have supported our agency. Again, Trooper Ball, for what you all faced that day. It's unimaginable. You just can't imagine that unless you were there. But again, I want to thank everyone. In my 28 years as Kentucky State Trooper, I've never seen the overwhelming support that we've had from multiple entities across Kentucky to support our men and women. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, our commissioner's doing a great job, and I just want to emphasize two different things that he said. Now, number one is when I came into office, KSP was not in a good place. We've been losing officers for far too long. And today, you heard what a good place that we are in, how much progress we've made from going to historic lows to pushing, hopefully, towards historic highs. That is the difference between having a trooper to cover a county that might just have one sheriff and one deputy and not having that trooper. That's the difference in multiple people being able to respond to a difficult situation and somebody being on their own. But the other piece is we can get caught up in numbers. We can get caught up in number of troopers or the size of the raise. But I also get to hear the difference that's made in these families. I had one trooper tell me that the raise made it possible to get more therapy for his child. To think that one of our troopers that puts his life on the line, that stands between us and danger, was limited in what he could provide for his child is heartbreaking. And the fact that these raises have gotten beyond that is something really special. So at the end of the day, we should want the best for all of our Kentucky families. And oftentimes in government, that means stepping up and paying people better so that they can afford better for their families. Now, every day, my administration is committed to ensuring Kentucky remains a leader in public safety, enhancing law enforcement training, creating safer communities, and improving the safety of both Kentuckians and the law enforcement that protect them. The service and sacrifice of all of our officers does not go unnoticed. You make our communities stronger, our streets safer, and you make people feel better when they tuck their kids in at night. You are the best of us, and that's why we will keep fighting to protect you. Today, we have truly proven together we're creating a better, safer Commonwealth for everybody. All right, we'll start by taking questions on this topic, and then we'll excuse these two fine gentlemen, this hero over here, and I'll take questions on anything else.
The defined pension benefit, you said for all law enforcement, are you talking about all law enforcement regardless?
As a matter of policy, I believe that all law enforcement officers should be moved back to a defined pension benefit. Now, as the state, we are only responsible for a portion of law enforcement. So what our budget can do is fund, for instance, KSP at that full defined pension benefit. We'll need buy-in from counties and from others, but my goal is that we push and push to get back to that defined benefit, because when it was cut was the moment for police officers, social workers, educators, you pick. The moment we saw fewer applicants and we saw more retirements or more people quitting. You know, that pension was the way we retain people, was after a hard day. You know, do you decide you're going to go do something else, or do you come back to work the next day? With a defined pension benefit, you commit to decades of service knowing that there is a significant reward for your public service on the back end.
Have you had any conversations with Speaker Osborne or anybody in House leadership about putting this into the actual budget for next year?
So this has been in my budget on the Kentucky State Police side every time that I've submitted one. And they know that I support the biggest bump in the CLEP fund that we can make. I've always been a governor that believes that I should talk to the people of Kentucky first and foremost. They're ones that I serve. We look forward to having conversations with the legislature. Obviously, over the next 3 months, that might be a little bit challenging. But I'm hoping that once all the politics subside, once all the campaigns are over, it's going to allow us to have maybe better conversations than we've had in a while to hopefully get all these through. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, Tom.
Thank you, Governor. You mentioned that you were going to be laying out various aspects of your budget proposal here over the next month. What are some of the other topics that we can expect to see addressed?
We will be scheduling similar press conferences like this to explain those other topics. We'll let you know as they come up, but you know what I'm for. You know what I stand for. I've been very clear my priorities in each of our budgets, so you can expect to see the same. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all very much.